Welcome to another episode of InIIS InSIGHTS, the podcast of the Institute of Intercultural and International Studies at the University of Bremen in Germany. My name is Ricarda, and I'm very happy to be meeting Ahmet Kuru today. Ahmet is a professor of political science at San Diego State University, where he also heads the Center for Islamic and Arabic Studies. He has several thought-provoking, inspiring, and quite renowned works to show in his academic career. For example, his 2009 book, Secularism and State Policies Toward Religion, with Cambridge University Press, in which he compared such policies in the United States, in France, and in Turkey. But today we want to talk about the journey of his 2019 monograph, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, a Global and Historical Comparison, also published with Cambridge University Press, and which has made a spectacular career since then. Unlike most other academic pieces, this book has been quickly translated into many languages, into Persian, Arabic, Indonesian, Bosnian, Dutch, French, Urdu, Malay, Hindi, and most recently also German. In fact, I have never come across such successful translation work, which I found very noteworthy and would like to discuss and reflect upon. So, this episode is only indirectly about the specific content of the book, but rather with the international experiences the author has made since then, about the nature of discourses and debates on state and religion in Muslim contexts, about the logic of arguing for separating the two, and about the idea of writing this from a specific Muslim perspective. It is so great to welcome you, Ahmed, and to finally be able to discuss these issues with you. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for having me.
So, Ahmed, your book is a couple of years old now, 5 to 6 years, and from what I observe is that something drives you. You wrote this for more than pure analytical reasons and purposes. You have been promoting your book almost globally throughout the Muslim world, but not just the Muslim world, but you have your book translated into German recently, into French and several other languages, etc. And I'm really interested to talk about your experiences in that movement from the sphere of knowledge production to then proper intellectual but also political engagement based on the findings of your book or so. And given that I see in you something like a global public intellectual on the issue of Islam and politics based on your academic work, I'm really interested to see how you reflect upon your experiences in your trips, especially to Southeast Asia and other regions and countries. I assume you can easily deliver the analytical message of your book, but what is it that you then talk about in your many meetings with intellectuals on the matter? And what would you say are like big differences, like topical, thematic differences? So how do people or intellectuals in Indonesia and Malaysia pick up your book and want to interact with you on?
Yeah, thank you, Roy. This is a complex question, and let me elaborate several points you touch upon. First of all, you and I have been in touch for many years. You came to my Münster webinar, Zoom event, and then we are sharing exchange about books and feedbacks. And that's why you are part of the process. And you are in a country which I pay very strong attention, Germany. I visited Germany 3 times in the last 2 years and spent 1 month in Berlin for study my new populism project. And just the German translation came out, which make me happy, by Springer, because Germany is a crucial country on the debates on Islam with more than 2.5 million Muslim population, now even growing with coming some more Arab immigrants to German becoming citizens and residents. So I was talking to a friend recently. He told me that you always wrote books after a trauma you experience. It's not personal trauma, but an intellectual trauma. And I thought, my friend, yeah, you're right, because my first secularism book was my dissertation in 2006, then published in 2007 with the title Secularism and State Policies Toward Religion, United States, France, and Turkey. It was an academic reply to what Turkey experienced from 1990s to early 2000 at Turks called February 28 process, which is a military-driven secularist attempt to somehow put Islamic activism under control. And the headscarf ban was at the center of the process. And that's how I engaged and wrote my dissertation, and then became a book, Why the French Type Assertive Secularism Turkey Emulate and Embrace is Different from American Type Passive Secularism. Then this secularism book gets some attention in the Arab world, translated into Arabic, a version of it translated into Chinese, and in Turkey it had a real impact because Ergün Özbudun, who recently passed away, a great scholar, was drafting a new constitution. And he gave an interview saying that we just had a Columbia University conference on Turkey and the new constitution. And a new young scholar, Ahmet Kuru, coined the term passive secularism, American style secularism. And we are going to draft a new constitution based on passive secularism. And it was 2009 when Kemalists in Turkey, the more assertive secularist elite, were still in power in the media and in the court system. And they attack Özbudun and they attack me, putting my photo, writing beneath Ahmet Kuru, passive secularism, made in USA. So then after the transformation in Turkey, I was happy to see the headscarf ban was lifted. The Turkish Constitutional Court even had a decision, and then they said they used my book saying that Turkey would no longer be exclusionary secularist, but will be more liberal secular. And then I was very happy with the Arab Spring and the euphoria on democratization. Then came 2011, 12, 13, 14, almost breakdown of democracy in Turkey. And then the Arab Spring didn't produce any democracy. With this disappointment, I started to write the Islam book. It was, of course, had a huge background as a person who was born in Turkey, and constant questions Turks ask: what happened to old glory? Why we were we was an important empire, but now a third world country. How that Europe surpass us? And all the questions culminate in my new book, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, a global and historical comparison. Starting with the title, I had both academic challenges and personal. Because in my personal life, the really more pious religious members of my family said, why did you put Islam with a bad name, authoritarianism under development? How come you do that? And I explained them that I study Islam and democracy for 20 years, but I cannot study something that does not exist anymore. If 50 Muslim majority countries, if 44 of them became authoritarian, what, as a scholar, even if I am a practicing Muslim myself, but as a social scientist, I have to study the phenomenon, Islam and authoritarianism, rather than something very rare, Islam and democracy. So then I wrote the book from a very academic point of view. I tried to use primary resources as much as possible. And then I put the details, and it took about 10 years to finish it. And I wasn't expecting a public acceptance. I was expecting academic reviews here and there in journals. But the public attention started in social media first in several countries. Then a major issue was in Indonesia. So Indonesians' main public publisher, popular publisher, trade book publisher, Gramedia, asked to get its copyright. So they translate the book, and unlike my original Cambridge University Press book, which is very academic, in Indonesia, they present as a popular book on Islam. And then it make fifth edition. Now, more than 10,000 copies, they say, has been sold, which is very unusual for an academic work. Then I gave many interviews to Indonesia, Indonesian media, and then I visited the country. And I taught an online course in the university, and I saw that there are two main reasons why they pay attention on the book. One thing is the book explained the Muslim Golden Age in a different way than the Islamists. Because Islamists say it's all about religion. If we increase religiosity, we'll be great again, make Muslims great again. But my book says, no, it's about diversity, cooperation with non-Muslims, learning from Greek, Sasani, Persian, Indian civilizations, and being open-minded, and to a certain level of separation between religion and state. Until from the 8th to 11th century, when Muslims had certain level of separation between religious, political, economic, and scholarly communities, they were successful. They were much developed than Europeans. But after the 11th century, when they lose this dynamism and diversity, they end up with clergy-state alliance, or I called ulama-state alliance. And ulama-state alliance marginalize philosophers, marginalize merchants, and we have the underdevelopment in the Muslim societies. And this thesis challenge not only certain Islamist cliche that there is no separation between religion and state in Islam, but also Orientalists in the academia, from Bernard Lewis to Samuel Huntington, who keep telling that there is no separation of religion and state in Islam. But my book show, both theoretically and historically, for 400-500 years, there was a separation. And from Indonesia, Malaysia, a neighbor country, translated, there was public attention, they invited me. And last year, I was planning to go Malaysia and Pakistan. And I was talking to a Pakistani friend whether it will be safe for me because of some reformist ideas, whether Islamists would attack me there. Because I am for the abolishment of apostasy laws and critical of blasphemy laws because they are against freedom of speech and freedom of religion. My friend says, Ahmet, you are rightly asking about Pakistan, but you are taking Malaysia too lightly. Malaysia also may be very problematic for you. But I thought, no, Indonesia, they allow me. Why not Malaysia? I went there. Then they canceled my talks. There was a social media attack. It was really an attack because they say he is coming to destroy Sunni Islam. And I tried to explain them that I'm from Turkey. I grew up in a Sunni family. I define myself follower of Abu Hanifa in terms of religious thought. How come you define me? They say you are liberal. Then my son find a T-shirt writing, I am not a liberal. Then I put on Facebook. My American friend says, are you planning to vote Donald Trump now? You are no longer liberal. I said, no, I'm trying to survive because they say it's too dangerous to be liberal and visiting Malaysia. So let me conclude by saying that the Malaysia experience, on the one hand, I met great friends. There is a wonderful feminist institution, Sisters in Islam, my publisher, academic people. I met Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, very diverse society. But at the same time, some Islamist cults and groups, they attacked me and they mobilized police. Unfortunately, Turkish diplomats also collaborate with those police. So the policeman came to airport, tried to seize my passport. I was lucky to have contact with the prime minister's advisors, some intellectuals there. So they stopped the police. I was able to fly. Then I canceled my Pakistan visit because of the safety issue there. I came back to US. Then the most important newspaper of Indonesia asked me to write about my story. And I wrote for Indonesian readers why Indonesia welcomed me while as Malaysian police tried to arrest me. And Indonesians really like this comparison. So this is the story of Southeast Asia.
Maybe beyond these, public events and this politics of making you public and attacking you, etc. But the debates you usually have on the content of separation of religion and the state, how tricky is it to deliver that message, and what are the usual intellectual exchanges on this matter? Let's say in the many Indonesia talks and debates that you did have.
Yeah. So I think what makes Islamists in Malaysia and some other contexts worried about is that I'm making the argument from an Islamic point of view. I'm not promoting a Western agenda, an American, European, Eurocentric view, but instead I am telling that, look, the claims that religion and state should be together doesn't have any base in the Quran or the Hadith. There are some fabricated hadiths based on Sasani Persian maxims. And then Muslim history, the main scholars and founders of Sunni and Shia jurisprudential schools like Abu Hanifa, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, Ahmed bin Hanbal, I'm bringing proofs from their writings to show that there should be some separation. That makes Islamists really worried. But one thing I want to show that there is a metaphor of an elephant. In a dark room, you put an elephant. Some people touch its legs and say it's like a pillar. Some people hold the tail, not it's like a rope. So the different perceptions of the same object. So the book really became like an elephant. So for some people, for example, the separation issue is important. For other people, for example, for Muslim minorities, when I was invited to launch Dutch version of the book in Belgium and Netherlands, then the French version in France, people ask me, how would this book be contributing to debates on Islam in Europe now? And I'm telling them repeatedly that, look, the book shows that the Muslim and European cultures have had so much entanglements, mutual exchanges, and Muslims learn many things from China and India, like paper making and mathematics. And then they taught them to Europeans. That's why Europeans now call numbers Arabic numerals, and alcohol, algorithm, algebra, many concepts coming from Muslim Arab civilization. And that's why Muslim minority in Europe now should free to fully integrate to European societies, because if we are talking about civilization, Muslims contributed to rise of European civilization. If we are talking about development toleration, Muslim societies were originally much more open-minded. They were multi-religious. They were teaching Europe at the time. So that's my message in Europe. And last month, I was invited to India, which was a very tricky issue, because India has 200 million strong Muslim minority. And now there is a right-wing populist government in charge. So what should I tell in India? And then some of my friends says that you should not go there because they may use you. So first of all, whomever I interact with, whenever I give interview to Tehran Times, mouthpiece of Iranian regime, or Al-Ahram, now under control of Sisi, Egypt, or when I wrote a report for Tony Blair Institute, or when I went to WZB in Berlin, my friends always warn me, they will use you, they will use you. And I'm telling them that if I reject invitations of interview, visit, talking to people, then what is the limit of rejection? Am I going to talk to people I agree with 100%? If so, I cannot talk to anyone, because even my wife and I have certain disagreements, right? You can find someone you are in agreement with 100%. But my principle is that I will give, if they give me a platform where I can explain my ideas, and then we have a fair and civilized debate, then I accept almost all invitations. So I accept the invitation and went to India. And in India, when they launched my books in the version, there were government officers there, etc. And there I gave a speech saying that equal citizenship is key. So Muslims contribute to India historically, and India was very important for Muslim golden age. And today, Indian Muslims are expecting to receive equal citizenship rights, but they are expected to contribute to society. And as a Muslim in America, that's how I see myself. Therefore, the book engaged in multiple debates. Maybe that's why there are now a global attention to its content.
How much would you say did you pick up this American part of it? With this American culture of I don't know, let's say free speech above everything, freedom of religion, differently understood than in some European traditions, but also differently understood than in several Muslim political traditions or so. How American would you say are you in this approach after your many years now living there?
In my first book, Secularism book, it was very visible because I propose the state religion system of secularism in America as something better than France. And even I've thought that in the French TV, French channel 25 asked me to interview for secularism. I said, look, American multiculturalism and passive secularism with hyphenated identities and Black Lives Matter movement is now a source of inspiration for the French attitude of seeing Muslims as only religious agents, disregarding that they are mostly Africans coming from former French colonies. But at the same time, we should not overly romanticize America. Now America in a mess, with the right-wing populists coming into power. We don't know where we are going economically and politically. In the Islam book, the impact of America is much less, much implicit. Of course, my personal growing, my education, mostly American. But at the same time, when we look at issues like justice and fairness, these are the key concepts Muslim scholars idealize. And for them, in order to avoid corruption and to be just and fair, certain level of separation between religiously academic class and political class is necessary. And let me tell you this, that in theory, Muslims still would agree with this. That's why when I published the book, people were not surprised and shocked, because in theory, when you listen to the discourse, they always say that a good scholar should avoid politics. A good scholar should be humble to reject public money. But the practice is sharply different, from Turkey's Diyanet to Egypt's Al-Azhar to Pakistan's Sharia courts to Iranian mullah class. In practice, they are in public, they are receiving public money, and corruption cannot be even measured because there is no boundary between religion and politics, between public and private. That's why I try to document my arguments by Islamic history, scholars, some key names like Abu Hanifa, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Khaldun. That's why I don't see the argument is very much American. It's very Islamic, but at the end we can say universal, because America learned freedom of speech from Europe. Europe, one major name, for example, was John Locke. And we today have certain assumption, at least, that John Locke read Muslim philosophers. Ibn Tufayl, Ibn Yaksan gave the idea to John Locke of tabula rasa. Therefore, the American notion of freedom originated European notion of freedom, and I see it originated from Arab Muslim. It's a universal concept of freedom.
Yeah, that's maybe what also gives you so much drive to engage in these various contexts or so. Would you say the problem is always the same, or did you find, let's say, differences in why Islam became politicized, or why people try to sacralize their own political aspirations, try to sacralize the state with some Islamic message or so? Is it all the same? Is it the same drive to fuse these two, especially in the past, let's say 3 to 4 decades, would you say, or what? Or do you see major differences across even Southeast Asia also?
First of all, we have a human problem. If you look at the Jews, Christians, Hindus now, with the right-wing populism, which is my new book project, we see the clergy-state alliance is becoming a universal issue. Yes, I did write my book on the Muslim societies, but every societies are going to a crisis now. And parameters of the problem you are asking, very similar. Here is how I realized that. So Times Literary Supplement review my book as one of the books of the year 2022 and says that if you read this book, you understand not only Muslim societies, but also understand Russia, how Putin in Russia is now establishing a clergy state alliance with the Orthodox Church. Then a scholar from Israel review my book saying that you should read this book to understand Benjamin Netanyahu, how he is establishing alliance with right-wing religious parties. And BBC Hindi 4 years ago asked an interview, and I said them, why are you inviting me? Because I don't study India. They say, the reason is that a week after Erdogan converted Hagia Sophia into a mosque again, Modi is now putting the foundational stones of a Hindu temple on the site of destroyed Muslim Babra Masjid mosque. So we want to explain. I said, oh, okay, then I will do that if you let me include Donald Trump and comparing the three. So as you see, first of all, it's a human problem. We tend to bring together religion, politics, and now in America, also corporations, Elon Musk and others. So the idea of separation, I think it's an important principle, but human has the temptation to merge them to reach more power. And as Lord Acton says, absolute power corrupt absolutely. That's our human problem. I only look at the Muslim side so far. Maybe in the new project, I should look at globally. Another point is that in different Muslim societies, I see people sharing my concerns. We talk about Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, India. Now the book is going to be translated into Uzbek, Kyrgyz, Turkish, and then in European societies, and also a very important publication in Arabic and Persian. So the book was Persian in London, but I gave many interviews in Iran. And in various Arab countries, we had nights debates. I visited Morocco, and I'm writing a monthly column in Al Jazeera Arabic. So the Arab audience now is very much looking for new alternatives to the solutions, to the problems. And let me tell you this, the problems of authoritarianism, underdevelopment, and you may also add violence, everyone accepts that they are problems. So this is, once again, it's not an American way of looking and saying, oh, these societies don't have development and democracy. No, the people there asking more participation, less corruption, more development. That's why in the Arab Spring, people were protesting. That's why in Turkey, most people want going back to democracy again. On the solution, of course, we have alternative discussions. And my proposal is that the Muslim society should dismantle ulama state alliance, promote freedom of speech and property rights, eliminate blasphemy, apostasy laws. And at a time when Americans, some Europeans, moving to more right-wing authoritarian tendencies, maybe it's time for Muslims to claim democracy, claim freedom, not as a Western project, but based on their history, based on human universal values.
In these past years, Juan Cole and others have written a lot about some idea of new atheist youth, or if not atheist, then at least youth being more distant to the version of religion, the version of Islam they grew up with, and they then may eventually rebel against. Do you see the impact of that? Like the understandings that youth have now with regard to state-religion separation and with regard to refusing indoctrination of through religion and intrusions into their life, that this holds. So could there be something like a generational shift with the, let's say, current youth rejection of that, or is that too weak a force, would you say?
I definitely see it. So they say every action creates a reaction. And when religion and politics come together, the critiques of politics become critiques of religion too. And again, this is a universal idea. First, I think systematically mentioned by Alexis de Tocqueville, the early 19th century French scholar. He said in his book, Ancien Régime, about the French old regime, when religion cooperates with government, it takes all the risks of anti-government people attack religion. This is one of my explanation about the necessity to separate them, to make religion a moral source of principles and ethics, and be able to critical of corrupt governments rather than becoming part of them. And now we have survey data showing that half of Iranians are saying that they are no longer Muslim. We have a debate in Turkey about the rise of deistic or agnostic students, even in Islamic Imam Hatip schools. And Juan Coles and others are also talking about Arab countries. And even in America now, although we were saying that America is more religious than Europe, now the percentage of unaffiliated people in America in the last 20 years jumped from 10% to 25%. One explanation is that young generations see churches part of Republican Party. And if they are critical of Republican Party in America, they become less affiliated with organized religions. So this is the answer to your very important question.
Thank you very much, Ahmed. This was really interesting to see also that side of your story, because I only see all your activism, but you know, I of course then miss a lot of the details and a lot of what, you know, what drives you and what pushes you to really go on these global tours or so. Will you be going to places like, I don't know, Nigeria or Tanzania as well, where I don't know, which have,
So
you know, very strong
Somalia,
histories of Christian-Muslim cohabitation and interaction, etc.
yeah, no, you are right, because when I was doing my postdoc at Colombia with Alfred Stepan, we were studying Turkey, Indonesia, and Senegal, three non-Arab Muslim secular democracies. And Senegal, with neighboring Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, were very important because they were showing us that Muslim majority countries can be more democratic. They are Christian majority neighbors. Unfortunately, in the last 10 years, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso became authoritarian, but Senegal is still there. And with the French edition of my book, now they are able to read it. And then I just gave a long interview to leading Senegalese newspapers. So they are inviting, that's a possibility. Another thing was Somalia, interestingly. Somalia showed very deep interest. There were three different translation projects, all of them canceled because of the fear that there is no safety. There is Boko Haram, not Boko Haram, but Al-Shabaab and even ISIS. So it is dangerous to translate a book, Critical of Ulama in Somalia, they say. In Nigeria, there are some online publishers publish my articles in English. No translation yet, but I have some friends there. So yeah, Africa is growing population and important, but I have some access there too, yes. And Latin America, in Brazil, now they are translating to Portuguese. So I may visit Brazil for the Portuguese. And I have a very good friend in Chile, and he is translating to Spanish some of my writings, summarizing the book. So since, Roy, we are living in a time of internet, in order to reach young people, I'm giving podcast interviews, writing short articles, because not all of them are able to read the book, even to listen to audio version of the book.
Okay, great. So the journey continues with that book, and I wish you all the best with it, Ahmed. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.